Welcome, chess assassins in training. This video is the beginning of a series entitled Tactical Battles in the Sicilian. We're not going to focus on names, only on concepts and ideas. Let us begin. This prophylactic move, Queen D1 to E1, prepares an advance of the G and H pawns. You see the arrows. Black is using a strategy that involves setting up a strong defensive unit against an oncoming army. Now, the thing that you have to be aware of is that this approach has its downside, and that is if Black becomes too passive, then his method of defense can lead to defeat. Notice how white just transferred the queen to the king side. Now this is the start of my topic, advanced strategy and tactics of modern chess. Now from here I will be making 8 key practical points that every chess assassin in training must know. Key point number 1. In order to invade the enemy camp, an army had to cross the T. Now you probably already know what that T is in chess. Crossing the T is a classic maneuver which maximizes the power of the attacker while minimizing the power of the defending forces. Now this is how the Samarais took over Japan. In chess, the T is that horizontal line between the 4th and 5th ranks. Now, white's plan is a straightforward pawn assault on the king side and in the center. He's going to advance the pawn from F3 to F4, followed by the pawn on E4 to E5. Now, the typical pawn maneuver that white initiates on the queen side is the pawn on C4 to C5. Key point number 2, the indirect approach. Now, this method of attack is when a minority of your forces attack on the forefront, while the majority of your forces advance from a hidden area and attack the enemy from the flanks. Now, this is white's approach. The pawns on E4 and F4 are attacking on the forefront, while a knight will be deployed to A5, where it will be attacking the bishop on B7 on the queen side. And on the king side, the queen aids in the attack there. Key point number 3. Now the knight just retreated from d4 to b3. Now this is an artificial retreat. Now what is an artificial retreat? This is when a frontal force fake a retreat, drawing the opponent in pursuit and then launching an assault with strong forces held in reserve. This last retreat by the knight to b3 opens up the pathway to black's d6 pawn. Also, it opens up the bishop's range, pointing to the pawn on b6. Also, the rook on d1 pins the pawn to the queen. And lastly, it prepares a potential transfer of the knight to a5 once the pawn on b6 is eliminated. Now here comes the in-between move, exploiting the pin of the knight to the queen. Key point number 4. Attack in oblique form. Now this involves placing your forces in a slanted fashion. Look at white's king side. Queen g3, pawn f4, pawn e5, and finally to the queen side, a rook on d6. They're all attacking in oblique form from the king side to the center. And the minor pieces are geared toward the queen side. If you pay attention to the way that the bishops are pointing, the bishop on b6 on the g1 to a7 diagonal, the bishop on the f1 to a6 diagonal, and the knights over on the queen side ready to launch an attack. Now the plan here for white is to try and eliminate both of black's bishops while creating passed pawns, and follow up with knight e4, a central square from which the knight will be hitting critical dark squares. So the exchange sacrifice of the rook on d6 will yield white an even better initiative. Okay, the knight is on e4 and the bishop is on d4. They're working together like a Chinese connection. They both support a c4 to c5 pawn advance, and secondly, they both attack the critical f6 square. White's queenside pawns are very dangerous, and a move such as f7 to f5 with an attempt to dislodge the knight on e4 would seriously weaken the light squares around the black's king. Now white, what he's doing, the backward move of the bishop from e2 to f1, he's repositioning the bishop. He's going to place it on g2 to support the knight on e4. And e4 is actually the knight's operation base. So it's a small fortress with the queen on g3, rook on the second rank. Bishop will go to g2 and the knight will operate from e4. The knight on e4 also hits f6, g5, g3, f2, d2, c3, c5, and d6. 8 squares. It's what we call an octopus knight. Check. And I believe with the extra piece, I think white has this game. Possibly with the extra piece. Rook on the open D file. And I don't think those pawns are going to promote any of those black's pawns on the king's side. Plus white has 2 pawns on the queen's side versus black's 1. But that concludes this lesson among many to come. Thank you for watching.